How Dawson and Tax Court can help keep the IRS in check. The IRS is powerful, but it is not above federal law and federal courts. If you feel the IRS has issued an arbitrary or incorrect decision, you may have the right to go to tax court. You utilize this right by petitioning tax court via Dawson. Hi, I'm attorney Jim Daloisio, Director of Legal Services at Torchlight Tax. When the IRS sends a serious tax notice, many taxpayers assume the case is already over. They think the IRS has made its final decision, the amount is locked in, and the only thing left to do is pay. But that is not always true. In many IRS disputes, the taxpayer has the right to take the case to the United States Tax Court. And today, many tax court cases are started and managed through a system called Dawson. Dawson stands for Docket Access Within a Secure Online Network. In plain English, Dawson is the United States Tax Court's online filing and case management system. In most cases, you and your attorney never physically go to a courtroom, yet you are officially under tax court, and the IRS is not all-powerful. It allows taxpayers and authorized representatives to file a petition, submit documents, review court filings, track deadlines, and monitor what is happening in the case. That may sound technical, but it is extremely important. The United States Tax Court is not just another IRS department. Tax court is a separate federal court where taxpayers can challenge certain IRS decisions. In many cases, the taxpayer can go to tax court before paying the disputed tax. That is a major taxpayer protection. It means the IRS does not always get to assess the tax, demand payment, and move forward without being challenged. The taxpayer may have the right to say, "No, I disagree. I want this reviewed by the United States Tax Court." The process usually starts with an IRS notice or determination that gives the taxpayer the right to petition tax court. This video explains your rights and how the process works in some detail. If you prefer to discuss your situation with an expert without viewing the entire video, you are welcome to contact Torchlight Tax for a free consultation at 87775-87797 or email info@torchlighttax.com. One common example is IRS Notice CP3219, a Statutory Notice of Deficiency, sometimes called a 90-day letter. That notice generally means the IRS intends to assess additional tax, penalties, or interest. If the taxpayer disagrees, the taxpayer usually has 90 days to file a petition with the United States Tax Court. That deadline is very important. If the taxpayer misses the deadline, the IRS may be able to assess the tax, and the taxpayer may lose the chance to challenge the issue in tax court before paying. But deficiency cases are not the only situations where Dawson may be used. Another example is a collection due process case. This may happen when the IRS files a federal tax lien or proposes a levy against wages, bank accounts, Social Security, state tax refunds, or other property. In that situation, the taxpayer may request a collection due process hearing with IRS appeals. At that hearing, the taxpayer may raise issues such as whether the IRS followed proper procedures, whether collection should go forward, whether the taxpayer qualifies for an installment agreement, whether an offer in compromise should be considered, whether the taxpayer is in financial hardship, or whether another collection alternative is appropriate. If IRS Appeals issues a notice of determination and the taxpayer disagrees, the taxpayer may have a limited time, often 30 days, to file a petition with the United States Tax Court. That gives the taxpayer a way to challenge the collection decision. Another example is an innocent spouse case. Innocent spouse relief may apply when one spouse or former spouse is held responsible for tax related to a joint return, but the facts show it may be unfair to hold that person liable. If the IRS denies innocent spouse relief, or if the IRS fails to issue a determination after enough time has passed, the taxpayer may be able to petition tax court and ask the court to review the matter. There are also other types of tax court cases. These may include certain worker classification disputes, interest abatement cases, whistleblower award cases, and passport certification cases. The key point is this: Dawson is not just for one IRS notice. Dawson is the online system used by the tax court for many types of cases where the taxpayer has received the kind of IRS notice, determination, or decision that gives them the right to go to tax court. So how does the process actually work? Let's walk through it. First, the IRS issues a notice or determination. That could be a statutory notice of deficiency, a notice of determination after a collection due process hearing, an innocent spouse determination, or another notice that gives tax court rights. This notice is the trigger. It tells the taxpayer what the IRS intends to do, what the IRS has decided, or what rights the taxpayer has to dispute the matter. Second, the taxpayer must act before the deadline expires. This is critical. Tax court deadlines are not casual deadlines. They are not deadlines you should assume can be extended. If the taxpayer misses the deadline, they may lose the right to have the tax court review the case. That is why it is so important to read IRS notices carefully. Do not just look at the balance due. Do not just look at the scary language. Look for the deadline. Look for the right to petition tax court. Look for words like Statutory Notice of Deficiency, Notice of Determination, or petition the United States Tax Court. Third, the taxpayer files a petition with the United States Tax Court. In most cases, that petition can be filed electronically through Dawson. A taxpayer can also file by paper, and certain special filings, such as a petition filed under seal, must be handled on paper. The petition tells the court that the taxpayer disagrees with the IRS decision and wants the court to review the case. The petition does not have to prove the entire case on day one, but it does need to identify the dispute and preserve the taxpayer's rights. Fourth, once the petition is filed, the tax court assigns a docket number. That docket number matters. It means the case is now in a court-supervised process. The dispute is no longer just sitting inside the IRS notice system. The taxpayer now has a tax court case. Fifth, the IRS must respond. At that point, IRS attorneys become involved. The government has to review the case, respond to the taxpayer's petition, and deal with the issues inside a formal court process. That changes the dynamic. Before tax court, the taxpayer may feel like they are simply trying to convince the same IRS employee, department, or unit that made the original decision. After the petition is filed, the case moves into a different forum. The IRS has to deal with the taxpayer's arguments in a court-supervised setting. Sixth, the taxpayer and their representative begin organizing the case. This is where the real work often begins. The taxpayer may need to gather tax returns, bank records, accounting records, QuickBooks files, receipts, invoices, loan documents, legal arguments, penalty defenses, collection alternative proposals, innocent spouse facts, financial statements, or other supporting documents. This step matters because many IRS cases are not lost because the taxpayer had no argument. They are lost because the argument was not presented properly. The documents were incomplete. The records were not organized. The IRS employee did not fully understand the business. The taxpayer missed a deadline. The taxpayer did not know what legal standard applied. Or the taxpayer responded emotionally instead of strategically. Tax court gives the taxpayer an opportunity to bring the dispute into a more formal process. That can be very helpful. Sometimes the IRS disallows deductions because it says there was not enough documentation. But the taxpayer may have bank records, accounting records, invoices, contracts, or other evidence showing the expenses were legitimate. Sometimes the IRS imposes penalties without fully considering reasonable cause. But the taxpayer may have a strong explanation for why the penalty should not apply. Sometimes the IRS rejects a collection alternative without fully understanding the taxpayer's financial situation. But the taxpayer may be able to show that an installment agreement, offer in compromise, currently not collectible status, or another resolution is more appropriate. Sometimes the IRS denies innocent spouse relief, even though the facts may support the taxpayer. And sometimes the taxpayer had records all along, but those records were never presented properly, never reviewed properly, or never understood by the IRS. the tax court process can force a more serious review. Seventh, the case may be negotiated before trial. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings about tax court. Filing a tax court petition does not usually mean the taxpayer is going straight into a courtroom for a dramatic trial. Many tax court cases are resolved before trial. They may be resolved through settlement, stipulation, agreement, or further review by IRS counsel. In many cases, the goal is not to have a trial. The goal is to get the case into the right forum, in front of the right people, with the right evidence, so the taxpayer has a real chance to challenge the IRS position. That is one of the major advantages of using the tax court process correctly. It creates structure, it creates deadlines, it creates accountability. It forces the IRS to take the taxpayer's evidence and legal arguments seriously. It often moves the case from the IRS employee or department that made the original decision to IRS counsel, where the case may get a fresh legal review. And it gives the taxpayer a way to challenge the IRS before the IRS has the final word. That is how Dawson and Tax Court can help keep the IRS in check. The IRS may say you owe the money. The IRS may say your deductions are denied. The IRS may say your collection alternative is rejected. The IRS may say innocent spouse relief is denied. The IRS may say penalties apply. But if the law gives you tax court rights and you file a timely petition, the IRS may have to defend that position in a court-supervised process. That can change the conversation. Instead of simply asking the IRS to reconsider, the taxpayer is now saying, here is the evidence, here is the law, here is why the IRS is wrong. And now the IRS must respond inside a formal case. That is a different level of pressure. It does not mean the taxpayer automatically wins. It does not mean every case should be filed in tax court. It does not mean Dawson is some magic button that makes the IRS go away. But it does mean the taxpayer may have a serious legal process available that many people never use. This is also where representation matters. To represent a taxpayer in the United States tax court, the representative generally must be an attorney admitted to the tax court or a non-attorney who has been specially admitted to practice before the tax court. That is a very small group compared to the number of tax preparers in the country. About 1 in 5,000 tax preparers is authorized to represent taxpayers in the United States tax court. That means many taxpayers are working with professionals who may be very good at preparing tax returns, bookkeeping, payroll, or handling IRS correspondence, but who cannot represent them once the case moves into tax court. That is one reason this process is underutilized. At Torchlight Tax, we believe taxpayers need to understand their options before the deadline is gone. If you receive an IRS notice, you should not ignore it. You should not assume the IRS is right. You should not assume your only option is to pay. And you should not wait until the deadline has passed to find out whether tax court was available. Dawson is not magic. Filing a tax court petition does not automatically win the case. And not every IRS problem belongs in tax court. But when the taxpayer has the right notice, the right deadline, the right evidence, and the right representation, Dawson can be the doorway into a process that forces the IRS to review the case in a much more serious way. At Torchlight Tax, we had one client with a tax bill over $100,000 that he did not owe. The IRS refused to cancel it because he had not filed properly and missed deadlines to correct the issue. When the case went to tax court, IRS counsel contacted Torchlight Tax. We gave him all the data, and he sent the case back to the IRS to review. The IRS canceled the debt. Tax court can protect taxpayer rights. It can slow down an IRS action when the law allows it. It can create a path to settlement. It can allow the taxpayer to present evidence in a structured way. It can bring IRS counsel into the case, and it can help make sure the IRS does not get the final word without being challenged. That is the real power of Dawson and Tax Court. It is not about being aggressive, just to be aggressive. It is about using the legal process that Congress created to protect taxpayers. It is about knowing when the IRS decision can be challenged. It is about understanding the deadline. It is about filing the petition correctly It is about presenting the evidence properly, and it is about making the IRS prove or reconsider its position inside a court-supervised process. For taxpayers facing a statutory notice of deficiency, a collection due process determination, an innocent spouse denial, or another notice that gives tax court rights, this can be extremely important. The IRS is powerful, but the IRS is not above review. And in the right case, Dawson and tax court may be the process that finally forces the IRS to take a serious second look. For more background, watch our related videos, What is Tax Court? And What is an IRS Notice CP 3219A, Statutory Notice of Deficiency? At Torchlight Tax, we know that knowledge is power. For this reason, we have over 400 videos and blog articles on our Torchlight Tax website and YouTube channel covering bookkeeping, accounting, tax preparation, tax saving strategies, IRS representation, and asset protection. You are welcome to watch and learn from these videos. However, this can be overwhelming for many taxpayers, and so we offer a free consultation. Contact Torchlight Tax for a free consultation at 877-758-7797 or info@torchlighttax.com. If you found this video helpful, please like it, share it, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.